Hey, Mikey here with another episode of From a Songwriter's Point of View. I'm here today to talk about why musicians, or music people as I like to call them, are crazy. And people say they're crazy and maybe it's just self-fulfilling prophecy. Some musicians wear that like a badge. Psychologists say it's because they're artistic and a different part of their brain is being developed. According to doctors at Boston College Mind Lab, there are 5 parts of the brain bigger in a musician. But that could be due to brain plasticity or the use of that area of the brain. Practice? As you play an instrument, it works out various parts of your brain, and working on your brain is how it grows and makes new pathways. These guys always say this stuff, but they leave out the part about how a normal mind has other areas of the brain that grow bigger. Areas involved with manners, politeness, growing up. You know, normal stuff like history lessons. That stuff all your musician friends missed out on because they were too busy listening to the music inside their own heads. I think it's all due to some mothers putting their kids in the cradle, turning on the radio just to drown them out, you know? So I'd like to take a look at the logical side of crazy music people, based on my experience and what psychologists say. Let's take a look at the life of a music person, or musician. I just dislike the word musician. It sounds pseudo-mystical and, I don't know, call it what you may. In the life of a musician, as a little kid, you figure out you're musical. You start learning to play. First thing you hear is a brother or sister screaming, "When's he gonna quit playing that song? He's been playing it all day long. It sounds horrible." Ugh. There's a new mental pathway burned, one connected to the self-hatred part of your brain. Then your parents have guests, and you're learning to play trumpet. Your apartment or home has paper-thin walls, and you can hear them laughing. Then your mom and dad laugh along, saying, "Well, he does really try, doesn't he?" Not realizing that dad sounds a little bit like a trumpet right now in your mind. Then there's the young guitar player who gets cornered by his parents' friends. At some point, this friend of your parents says, "Your dad tells me you play guitar." You answer, "Well, yes, for 6 months now." Then he says, "Well, play for us." So you play one of the simplistic songs in your book you've been working on with your teacher. You barely have motor control over the too big guitar with bad strings and bad playability. It's so expensive, you always hear. But you play anyway to confused looks. Next thing you hear is the question, "Are you going to play in the symphony when you grow up?" New neural pathway burn from the motor skills part of your brain to the self-confidence part of your brain. You'd like to ask this person if he became a lawyer in 6 months, but you don't have the verbal skills quite yet to use sarcasm. Well, you'll learn as soon as you're through scorching your brain with humility modules. It's here that I want to look at parts of the brain in more detail. According to neuroscientists from places like McGill University and Tokyo University and several others, I found a lot of scientists basically saying many of the same things. There's part of the brain called the striatum. This is the part of the brain that sends out dopamine. That's the feel-good stuff you always get when you surf the net. We can all use a little dopamine, man. If you are getting monetary, food, or even erotic rewards, you get a jolt of dopamine. Now, of course, this part of the brain sends out dopamine as a result of taking drugs. So, you guessed it, it also sends out dopamine when you listen to a piece of music you really like. Oh, the auditory cortex just loves connecting with my parietal lobe. Whew. Now you understand why musicians keep coming back for more, even though the pay is lousy. Oddly enough, the striatum only seems to send out dopamine when it hears familiar music that it really likes from pathways already burned in the brain. With that, it adds up that people only tend to like the music they first like when they are very young and forming neural pathways to music. Now let's get into the different kinds of musicians or music people. Some play classical piano, some play Skinner, some play accordion, bagpipes, you name it. Then there's the non-playing music people, like sound techs, producers, publishers. All of these music people come from a different training, different background, different histories, and different listening experiences. They play different instruments and songs based on who and what they were raised hearing. So, musicians all hate each other because they rarely like the same music and they don't get high off the stuff you like. So you must be an idiot for liking that lame music. Geez, you wonder if music's all really just horrible. Add to this that if you listen to a group of people talk about a new song that's popular, most of what you'll hear is hatred for the new stuff, like the new hit that the kids all really like. Kids are still forming their musical brain pathways, so they are open to new music. Older people think new music isn't as good as what they grew up with, which really means they aren't getting the dopamine rush from new music anymore. This also means that musicians are stuck forever playing those few songs everyone knows and loves. You wouldn't want to play some of that non-dopamine stuff now, would you? Then comes all the things that happen later in a musical person's life. There's musical education. Classically trained people usually end up teaching, which oftentimes isn't what they wanted. They take their frustrations out on people or students whenever they get a chance. I spent several years managing a music lesson studio. Whew. Musical folks often have to make that grand presentation of their talents, often for people who don't care. Think about how many musical events you've had to go to along with others because someone else likes it. Someone is presenting a new show or the piece they must perform to graduate or many things. Musicians always ask their friends to come listen to them. Never mind what their friends like. Then there's the strife between husbands and wives. Well, what do you say to that? I guess, okay, you want to go see what show? Yes, yeah, okay. There's pop musicians who must stand out, must be different, so they do strange things to try to get attention. If they are in front of the right audience, they're great. If they're in front of people who aren't receptive to anything new and different, they're just plain weird. Jazz players study relentlessly, and the better they get, the smaller their audience gets. Most people get lost when you try to explain the circle of fifths to them. The stuff jazz players do is way beyond what people have the patience for. Then there's the other interesting things that musicians have to deal with. If people do like you as a musician, they want to buy you drinks and they want you to come party with them. Back to that addiction thing. Then there's the hours musicians keep. Up all night loading equipment, and then the need to shut off their hyperactive mind so they can get to sleep. There's a minority of people who like to go out and listen to someone play, but that's a small minority. It doesn't take long for a musician to learn that they are really selling alcohol. So musicians have addiction problems. If you weren't an addict, you probably wouldn't be in the music business. It's too tough. And if you're smart enough to be in the music business, you're too smart to be in the music business. I hope you'll tune in next time when I discuss why songwriters are crazy. You'd think songwriters and musicians are the same thing, but no. They're completely different. Be sure to leave me a thumbs up so I can get a dopamine rush, and even subscribe and comment so you too will get a dopamine rush. Thanks for listening. See you next time.